She said I'd never amount to anything, that I was a burden, a mistake, a parasite in her perfect family. But the next day, I stepped off a private jet in Paris, diamonds catching sunlight on my fingers, with cameras clicking and investors waiting. Let me tell you what she never saw coming, and why you might want to stay until the end. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe and join a community that believes in rising from the ashes. They say the worst cuts come from family. But I never expected to be publicly flayed at a dinner table set with bone china and gilt. It was my 29th birthday, or at least it was supposed to be. The table was immaculate. White roses in a Waterford vase, crystal glasses reflecting the candlelight, filet mignon plated like art. My husband, Ethan, had booked the Delacroix room at the Silver Fork, the kind of restaurant where the napkins cost more than my monthly grocery budget growing up. I wore a pale blue sheath dress I'd bought with my own savings, a rare splurge from 2 tutoring jobs. I'd even done my nails the way Ethan liked. French tips, understated. But none of it was for me. They were all there. His sister, her banker fiancé, 2 aunts I'd met once, and of course, her, Celeste, my mother-in-law, the woman who thought I'd married Ethan for his bloodline, not for the boy who used to write poetry on the back of his physics homework. When the waiter poured the champagne, I noticed how she didn't look at me, how her eyes scanned the rim of the glass instead. And when Ethan raised his flute to toast, to the woman who makes everything easier, I foolishly thought he meant me. Then she stood. Let's be honest, shall we? Celeste's voice had that porcelain sharpness that made people listen, even when they shouldn't. Ethan, darling, you've always had a big heart. It's why we worried when you brought her home. But somehow you've managed to keep the marriage afloat. There was laughter. Nervous, polite. My stomach folded in on itself. I mean, we've all seen how hard it's been for Julia to adjust. I suppose not everyone's cut out for the kind of life we live. Ethan said nothing, just looked down at his napkin. I wanted to say something, anything, but the weight of shame pressed hard against my ribs. Celeste lifted her glass again. To perseverance, even when you marry beneath you. The glass touched her lips. Mine trembled in my hand. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about marriage. This wasn't even about money. It was about erasure, me being erased, politely, elegantly, one microaggression at a time. After dinner, Ethan stayed behind to discuss something important with his uncle. I waited by the valet in the chill night air, arms wrapped around myself, until the Bentley rolled up. "Happy birthday," the driver said, his eyes not meeting mine. That night, I sat in Ethan's closet, surrounded by Brioni suits and leather shoes he never wore. I pulled out the journal I hadn't opened in months, flipping past pages of job rejections and apartment sketches. I landed on a page I'd drawn when I was 23. Jet, diamonds, my name on the door. It had been silly then, childish even. But now, it felt like a lifeline, not a fantasy, a checklist. And for the first time in 6 years, I let the fire build without trying to douse it. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg Ethan to stand up for me. I wouldn't cry in front of Celeste ever again. I'd make her regret underestimating me. But first, I had to remember who I was before her son, before I let luxury and lineage dull the edge of a girl who once dreamed of owning the sky. Tomorrow, I'd wake up with a plan. Tonight, I would sharpen the knives, quietly, carefully, because no one calls me worthless and gets away with it. Not anymore. And, I didn't sleep that night. While Ethan snored beside me, face buried in our $300 goose-down pillowcases, I lay awake, staring at the glow of the ceiling fan, remembering a version of myself I had buried under lace and silence. At 3:11 a.m., I rose from bed like a ghost and padded barefoot into the study. Ethan called it the whiskey room, lined with walnut shelves he never filled, and art he never understood. But I called it something else, mine, because in the bottom drawer of the antique desk, beneath the birth certificates and estate files his mother had gifted us on our wedding night, lived a version of my life Ethan never asked about. A folder, blue, battered, held together by 2 rubber bands and spite. Inside, drafts of a tech proposal I'd written 5 years ago, long before Ethan. Hand-sketched UI interfaces on coffee-stained paper, grant rejection letters addressed to Miss Julia Fern, and a single acceptance offer from the Hudson Women's Innovation Lab. The offer I'd declined, because Ethan had proposed 2 days before. Because Celeste had said, "Startups are for girls who don't marry well." because I was foolish enough to believe that choosing love meant choosing to put everything else on hold. I spread the contents across the mahogany desk, breathing life into dreams I'd embalmed. There it was again, my concept for a customizable luxury scheduling AI app. Think Siri, but with couture, the digital assistant for high-net-worth individuals who didn't just want their lives managed but elevated. I'd called it Elways, elegant, loyal, optimized, intelligent, seamless, empowered. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built the bones of a digital woman smarter, sharper, more sophisticated than I'd ever been allowed to be. And now I would resurrect her. By morning, Ethan was gone, having left a post-it on the fridge. Meeting with Glenn. Don't forget Pilates at 11. Love you. The love you was habitual, hollow, a comma away from obligation. I skipped Pilates. Instead, I drove across town to the small co-working space I used to frequent, the Hive, still buzzing with underfunded ideas and overpriced cold brew. The receptionist didn't recognize me in my camel coat and Celine sunglasses, but I recognized her. Tasha, pink hair, septum ring, ambitions louder than most investors could tolerate. Julia Fern, she blinked. Holy hell, I thought you vanished into rich wife heaven. Brief detour, I smiled. Is desk 14 still open? The space hadn't changed, still smelled like ambition and printer toner. I sat at desk 14 and powered up the old MacBook I hadn't touched in years. It coughed like an asthmatic, then purred to life. First, I opened the prototype files for Eloise. Then I opened the spreadsheets. Cost projections, competitor mapping, MVP goals. The work was all there, dormant but intact. She'd been waiting for me. I worked until my back screamed and my eyes blurred. At 6:22 p.m., I sent the first email. Subject, Eloise. Reimagining Luxury Efficiency, from Julia Fern, to womenintechhudsoninnovation.org. Dear Margaret, you once told me my app was a concierge's brain in a supermodel's body. I regret turning down your offer in 2018. If there's still room at your accelerator, I'm ready to build this. Fully. Attached. Updated pitch deck, revised business plan, new market data. Warmly, Julia Fern. Yes, that one. I hit send and felt something like an exhale escape from my ribs. That night, Ethan returned smelling of cigars and entitlement. Long day? He asked, peeling off his blazer, eyes already on his phone. You could say that, I murmured. He didn't notice the glitter in my eyes, or the ink on my fingers. He didn't see the ghost of the woman he married shifting into someone far more dangerous. He kissed my cheek absently. I kissed the air behind him, already elsewhere, already halfway to jet fuel and vengeance. By Wednesday morning, I had 5 blisters, 3 missed calls from Ethan, and 1 unread email that made my heart somersault in my chest. Subject, Eloise. Welcome back. From Margaret Klein. To Julia Fern. Julia, I've been waiting 4 years to hear from you again. I never deleted your contact. Never deleted your deck. Come in Friday. 10 a.m. No suits. No husbands. Just bring your fire. I sat in the back of my parked car, a steaming to-go latte burning my thigh, hands trembling slightly over the screen. It was real. The door I had once shut, out of love or cowardice or both, was cracked open again. This time I wasn't knocking. I was kicking it off its hinges. Ethan texted again. Hey, Mom's hosting dinner Friday. Can you RSVP for us? Of course. Friday. The day I was scheduled to walk into the Hudson Women's Innovation Lab and reclaim the future Celeste told me I wasn't worthy of. I stared at his text, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, can't. Big meeting. Might run late. RSVP us as maybe. No emoji. No apology. Just data. Because that's what Eloise would have said. The next 48 hours passed like a fever dream. By day, I transformed my old prototype into something sharper, sexier, scalable. I gutted every weak link in the original app architecture and rebuilt it using modern frameworks. I had to reteach myself through YouTube rabbit holes and Discord developer chats. I hadn't coded this much since grad school. It felt like breathing under cold water, terrifying, bracing, and weirdly addictive. By night, I rehearsed my pitch in the mirror. Luxury is time. Eloise gives it back to the elite, one intuitive command at a time, over and over, until I could say it in my sleep, or in front of a table of skeptical VCs. Ethan barely noticed the shift. He was prepping for a golf tournament with Glenn and whining about a potential merger that might delay his bonus. I began hiding my work in plain sight, app windows minimized beneath the home budget spreadsheet, notes disguised as yoga reminders on my phone. I'd once thought deception was poison to a marriage. Now, I saw it as armor. Celeste, meanwhile, was on a warpath. "Did you forget to RSVP to the dress fitting with Eleanor?" she asked me over speakerphone. "It's only for family." I was family, technically, but that wasn't what she meant. "No," I said. "I didn't forget. I chose not to go." There was silence on the other end. Then, "You've changed, Julia. I hope not for the worse." "Oh, I have," I said, my voice flat as glass. "But that's subjective, isn't it?" Friday arrived with rain, the kind of steady, confident downpour that makes even luxury SUVs look small. I didn't wear a suit. I wore a black turtleneck, high-waisted jeans, and the same leather boots I'd once used to teach night classes at NYU. My hair was pulled back into a clean, brutal bun. No earrings, no wedding ring. The Hudson Lab was nestled between a Pilates studio and a cupcake bar in Soho. Minimalist glass doors, discreet keypad. It didn't scream empire. It whispered it. Margaret greeted me herself. She was older than I remembered, or maybe just more powerful. Her handshake was firm, her lipstick red, her eyes assessing. "You brought fire," she said. I smiled. I brought the matchbook, too. The pitch room wasn't large, just a white table, 4 investors, and a wall screen. I took a breath, then began. Time is the one currency even billionaires can't mint, and yet they waste it on assistants, planners, coordinators who forget birthdays, or can't differentiate a 10K watch from a 30K one. Eloise isn't just a scheduling app. She's a lifestyle strategist, AI-driven, context-aware, emotionally adaptive. She doesn't just remind you to send flowers. She knows which florist your wife prefers, and when she's most likely to need them. She is not just efficient. She's elite. The demo was seamless. My voice didn't crack once. The investors leaned in by slide 3. By the end, Margaret leaned back, arms folded, nodding. "I want in," she said. "I'll match whatever funding you need to get the MVP live in 6 weeks." I blinked. "You're serious? You're too good for angel crumbs. We scale this. Fast." I walked out of the lab in the same rain I arrived in, but everything had changed. My phone vibrated. "Dinner at Mom's moved to 7. You can still make it, right? Ethan." I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the black mirror of a puddle. No, I couldn't make it. Not as Julia Mitchell, the docile daughter-in-law who smiled while being erased. But maybe, just maybe, I could show up as someone else entirely. When Celeste threw dinner parties, they weren't gatherings. They were performances, carefully staged spectacles where the menu was curated by a private chef flown in from Milan, and the guest list read like a hedge fund's Christmas card. Even the air seemed rehearsed, perfumed with expensive discomfort. Ethan had texted me 5 times before I even left the lab. "Are you coming straight from yoga? Mom says wear the blue Versace. Please don't bring up work stuff. The Steinmans will be there. Seriously, Julia, don't be late." I wasn't late. I was intentional. At 7:03 p.m., the Bentley pulled into Celeste's gated driveway, but I didn't step out of it, because I hadn't arrived in the Bentley. I'd arrived in the black Escalade trailing it, when the valet opened the door and I stepped out in heels I hadn't worn since our honeymoon in Lake Como. Black velvet, pointed, and sharp as spite. Ethan actually did a double take from the doorway. My dress was crimson, not the safe beige Celeste favored, not the demure navy from our engagement photos. Crimson, like a warning flare. The neckline dipped low enough to make statements, and high enough to remain unreadable. My grandmother's brooch sparkled at my shoulder like defiance. Celeste saw me next. Her lips didn't twitch, her brows didn't rise, but her wine glass tilted in her hand, just a degree too far, before she corrected it. "Darling," she said, air-kissing me with the enthusiasm of a corpse. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice smooth as mirror glass. "I've had quite a week." Ethan leaned in, his voice low. "You look incredible. What's going on with you?" "Clarity," I whispered. I got a little clarity. Well, the dinner table was a Monet of manipulation. Crystal stemware, monogrammed chargers, Celeste's seat at the head, naturally. I was placed 2 seats down, between Dr. Rothstein, the plastic surgeon who did everyone's non-surgical touch-ups, and Felicia Steinman, who once asked me if public school teachers had unions like coal miners. I said little during the appetizer course, but I watched, listened. Felicia bragged about her son's internship at Morgan Stanley, conveniently ignoring the fact that his father practically owned the building. Celeste gushed about Eleanor's upcoming wedding in Italy. We'll be flying commercial, but at least first class. Can't justify a jet for just 5 of us. That was when I smiled. Actually, I said, folding my napkin, you can justify it, if it's an investment trip. All eyes flicked to me. I'm sorry? Celeste asked. I flew private this morning, I said, casually sipping water. Met with investors, working on a launch. Felicia blinked. You're launching something? I am, I said. A digital platform. Celeste's smile frayed like old silk. Oh, darling. Is this one of those blogging hobbies again? I thought Ethan helped you move past that. Ethan cleared his throat. Julia's been working on something serious, Mom. Let's, I interrupted, setting down my glass. Actually, let's. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The homepage of Eloise glowed on the display. Sleek, modern, luxurious. She's called Eloise. Think of her as a digital concierge for the elite. Schedule management, intelligent reminders, luxury vendor curation, personalized to the user's aesthetic, tone, and even emotional patterns. Silence. Then, sounds like an AI secretary, Felicia said, adjusting her pearl cuff. Only if your secretary reads your moods, syncs with your spouse's calendar, orders the champagne your husband likes without being told, and reminds you to text your board member's wife on her anniversary. I let the pause stretch. She's already in beta. Hudson Lab is funding her launch. First-round investors close next month. Celeste recovered first. Well, I suppose there's always room for apps, isn't there? Even if the market is saturated. Actually, I said smiling, there's always room for solutions, especially the kind that make powerful women look even more powerful. Felicia coughed into her wine. Ethan stared at me like I'd just recited the Quran in Latin. The stapananasar after dessert, some gold-dusted creme brulee too delicate to crack. I excused myself to the terrace. The air was cooler there. Honest. Celeste followed 5 minutes later. She lit a cigarette. She only smoked when she was unsettled. You've been busy, she said, exhaling smoke and suspicion. I have. You know this won't last. I turned to face her, my earrings catching the light. Neither did your husband's last 3 companies, I said. But he kept showing up to boardrooms like a phoenix in pearls. So, her jaw twitched. I meant, she said, this act, this sudden surge of ambition. It's unbecoming. I stepped closer. Not to intimidate, just to let her see it. It's not an act, and it's not sudden. You just never looked hard enough to notice. She narrowed her eyes. You're playing with fire. No, I said, voice low. I am the fire. What? And later, in the car ride home, Ethan was quiet. You didn't have to humiliate her, he said finally. She called me a parasite last week, I reminded him, at my own birthday dinner. She's old school. She says things. But you, tonight, you were like someone else. I looked out the window. The city glowed with indifference. I'm becoming someone else, I said. But I married you, Julia. No, I said gently. You married a version of me Celeste would tolerate. He had no answer for that, and I didn't need one, because Eloise had her first 500 beta signups by morning, because Margaret had already looped in Vogue Business, because Celeste had just witnessed the first course of a feast she once claimed I'd never be invited to, and I hadn't even served the diamonds yet. The Monday after the dinner party, Ethan didn't kiss me goodbye. He muttered something about a client breakfast, grabbed his keys from the bowl I'd handcrafted years ago during a pottery phase he once found endearing, and left without looking back. I stood in the quiet kitchen for a long time, my coffee cooling untouched. Then I smiled, because I'd stopped needing his attention the moment I stopped craving his mother's approval, and that meant the detachment wasn't a wound. It was data, confirmation, a clear signal that the version of me they preferred, the obedient ornament in their curated world, had officially expired. By 10 a.m. I was at Hudson Lab. Margaret waved me in mid-call, mouthing, "Good news." I sat outside her glass office, watching a live dashboard showing early Eloise metrics. 600-plus signups, 74% engagement in the first 24 hours, 3 inbound requests for investor meetings. I watched the screen like someone watching their own ultrasound, awed that something growing inside them was real, alive, Becoming. At 10:42, Margaret opened the door. "She's got teeth," she said, pointing at the dashboard. "Real ones." I grinned. "Wait until she learns to run. Then we should talk about what comes next," she said. "Because this isn't just a cute project. This is scale-worthy." I nodded. "I have a roadmap." "Good. Because next month we pitch to LuxCon, and I want you on that stage." My smile faltered. LuxCon, the mecca of high-end innovation. A space where only the bold, the elite, or the extremely well-connected were invited to speak. It was televised, syndicated, critiqued, and I would be on stage. "Margaret, you'll need a team, I know. Start small, design, branding, PR. We'll get you a coordinator. But Julia, don't backpedal now. This is where you run." I swallowed, nodded, and ran. That night, Ethan noticed the champagne chilling in our fridge. "Are we celebrating?" he asked, peeling off his tie. "I got invited to speak at LuxCon." He blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously." "Wow." He paused. "That's impressive." He didn't say congratulations. He didn't ask for details. Just poured himself a glass and scrolled through his texts. Later in bed, I asked, "Are you okay with all this?" His silence was louder than any argument. "I'm not competing with you, Ethan," I said softly. "I know," he muttered, turning off his lamp. "But maybe I am." 2 days later, Celeste showed up unannounced. I was reviewing interface flows on my laptop when the intercom buzzed. I nearly didn't answer it. But curiosity, my oldest addiction, won out. She stood at the door in cream cashmere and diamond studs, like she'd walked off the cover of Country Estate. She didn't ask to come in. She simply stepped over the threshold like it was still 2017, and she still had dominion here. "I want to talk," she said. "Of course you do." We sat in the living room. I didn't offer tea. "I saw the article," she began. "Vogue Business. They called Eloise a luxury disruptor." They did. She studied me, her eyes calculating. "You're going to make money from this. That's the idea. And attention. A lot of it." I said nothing. She smoothed her skirt. "There's a way to channel that. Properly. Meaning philanthropy, boards, social partnerships, women's forums. Things that make money look tasteful." I laughed. "You want to turn me into a brand ambassador for gracious wealth. I want to protect you," she said sharply. "You don't know what visibility attracts." "Actually," I said, leaning forward, "I do. Because I spent 6 years being invisible, and I know exactly what people say when they think no one's listening." She flinched. Then, "Ethan's struggling with this." I froze. "He doesn't say it," she continued. "But I know my son. He thought he'd be the star, that you'd orbit him." "Well," I said, standing, "I guess we're in a different galaxy now." And I built my team fast. Anna, my UX designer, was Brazilian, brilliant, and had a soft spot for 3 a.m. ramen. Dev, my back-end engineer, had left Google after his manager took credit for his patent. Rena, my part-time assistant, was a barista I'd met at the Hive, who once organized a coffee expo with no funding and 2 weeks' notice. I wanted scrappy, loyal, sharp. I got it. We worked out of Margaret's spare office, eating cold pad thai and designing Eloise's rollout for LuxCon. Meanwhile, Ethan drifted further. He stopped asking about my day. He started sleeping in the guest room to get better rest. His phone lived face down on the kitchen counter. He claimed stress, deadlines, pressure, but I recognized the smell of distance. I'd once worn it like perfume. Still, I said nothing, because I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of forgetting myself again. The Friday before LuxCon, I received a couriered envelope, heavy, embossed, my name in calligraphy. Inside, a wedding invitation. Eleanor Mitchell, plus Bennett Graham, Villa San Michele, Florence, Italy. Private jet departure, April 18th, 10 a.m. Dress code, Tuscan formal. Celeste had attached a handwritten note. "We hope to see you both there. Bring that new sparkle of yours. Just don't outshine the bride." I stared at the script, then texted Margaret. "Can I pitch remotely from Italy?" Her reply came fast. "You can pitch from the moon as long as you close." And that night, I booked a private jet. My own. Not Ethan's family fund. Not borrowed status. Mine. It cost more than our kitchen remodel, but it bought something far more valuable. A statement. A reckoning. A runway. And when I stepped onto that jet, wrapped in silk and carrying the final beta version of Eloise on my tablet. I knew Celeste was going to see me land, and I wouldn't be carrying luggage. I'd be carrying diamonds. Then, there's a particular kind of silence on a private jet at 36,000 feet, one that hums with purpose instead of absence. No crying babies, no clinking plastic cups. Just the soft whir of systems optimized to make you forget you're moving. I didn't forget. I savored every mile. The invitation said 10:00 a.m. departure. The Mitchell family would be flying commercial in first class. Celeste's idea of restrained nobility. But I took off at 9:47, sipping espresso from bone china while reviewing my final pitch slides. Ethan had texted at 7:31 a.m. "Why aren't you at the airport?" I hadn't replied. Let him walk through TSA. Let him explain to his mother why I wasn't sitting dutifully in 2A, wearing pearls and a smile. Let him guess, because the woman he married was no longer taking connecting flights in coach. Florence greeted me with sunlit arrogance. Golden stone villas, blooming wisteria, an air so perfumed with citrus and legacy, it almost dared you to feel unimpressive. Villa San Michele, perched in the Fiesole Hills, loomed like royalty above the city. Ivy-draped facades, wrought iron balconies, and a staff trained in the art of invisibility. My driver, provided through a contact from Margaret's investor network, handed me an itinerary as I stepped onto the cobbled path. "Welcome, Ms. Fern. Your suite, Il Magnifico, terrace level. Your stylist will arrive at 3:00 p.m. Your LuxCon remote pitch has been confirmed. Saturday, 8:00 p.m. CET. Diamonds delivered to the concierge per instruction. Secured, insured, verified. Diamonds. Yes, they weren't ornamental. They were part of the presentation. Strategic. A nod to Eloise's partnership with an emerging AI-driven jewelry concierge service. Also, poetic. The girl Celeste called worthless would now be wrapped in stones cut with centuries of intention. Hain Dunham. Celeste didn't see me until the rehearsal dinner. The ballroom had been transformed into a Tuscan dream. Lanterns suspended like stars, tables wrapped in olive branches and soft ivory linens. Eleanor floated through it all in Dior couture, smiling that glazed smile brides wear when they're too hungry and too tense to scream. I entered at 7:05 p.m., exactly 5 minutes late. Not enough to be rude, just enough to be noticed. Heads turned. Ethan's cousin Patrick elbowed someone. Felicia Steinman actually whispered, "Oh my God," and Celeste, God bless her practiced composure, lifted her champagne flute halfway to her lips before freezing mid-motion. I walked toward her like I was crossing a runway instead of a ballroom. Red silk, custom, cut for battle, at my wrist. A single diamond cuff, understated but unmistakably real. "Darling," she managed, voice tight. "Buona sera, Celeste." I smiled. "The villa is breathtaking." She blinked. "You flew ahead?" I had a few things to prepare. "Alone?" "Of course." Ethan arrived 5 minutes later, sweating. When he spotted me, his expression flickered through 5 distinct emotions: relief, confusion, admiration, and something dangerously close to resentment. "You didn't answer my texts." "I was in the air," I said. "You could have told me you were flying separate." "And ruin the surprise?" His jaw clenched, but he said nothing else. Because there are no arguments you can win when your opponent has already landed. The next day, the wedding unfolded like a feature spread in Architectural Digest. Vows against a backdrop of the Arno, champagne toasts beneath columns older than America, guests in creams and blush tones, all whispering about Eloise without knowing I was the architect. Ethan tried to reclaim proximity during the photo ops. "Let's stand together," he said, hand at my waist, but it felt staged, like holding a book he hadn't read. When Celeste approached for the family portrait, she directed the photographer with the ease of a woman who'd paid for the lens. "Mitchell's to the front," she said. I took one polite step back. "No," she said quickly. "Julia should stand beside Ethan." I smiled. "I think I'll let the bloodline shine." That photo, I would later discover, never made it to Instagram. Akram. At 7:45 p.m., I slipped away from the reception. My suite had been prepped for the pitch. Blackout shades down, lighting optimized, camera crew arranged via LuxCon's international team. I stood in front of the lens in full glam, diamonds at my collarbone, and Eloise glowing beside me. "Good evening," I began, "from Florence. Time is the new luxury, and Eloise doesn't just manage it, she elevates it. She learns you, learns your rhythms, and adjusts your world accordingly. I spoke with the clarity of someone who'd been interrupted mid-sentence for 6 years and finally found the mic. The investors watched. The live chat lit up. When I finished, Margaret texted 2 words. You nailed it. I returned to the reception just in time for the father-daughter dance. Ethan stood at the bar, alone. Where were you? He asked. Changing the game, I said, accepting a flute of Prosecco from a passing tray. He looked at me, really looked at me. Who are you right now? The woman you married, I said, just finally unmuzzled. You make everything about power now. No, I said softly. Everything was always about power. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. At midnight, I stood on the villa's balcony, watching the moon carve silver into the city's edges. Celeste joined me. She handed me a small envelope. Inside, a note, not handwritten. Typed, you've proven yourself. That doesn't mean you're safe. Power attracts predators. Watch your back. CM. I folded the note, looked her in the eye, and said, I appreciate the warning, but I wasn't born for safety, Celeste. She nodded once, turned, and left me alone with the stars. When we returned to New York, everything felt colder. Not just because spring hadn't arrived yet, but because something between Ethan and me had definitively shifted, like tectonic plates grinding silently under polished hardwood floors. The morning after we landed, I found him in the kitchen pouring almond milk into his protein shake with clinical detachment. He didn't ask about LuxCon. He didn't mention the pitch, the applause, or the article that had appeared overnight on Forbes Women titled, Disrupting the Upper Class, How Eloise is Reshaping Luxury Time. Instead, he said, the dishwasher's leaking again. Call the super? I stared at him. I had just pitched in Florence, closed a 6-figure pre-seed round in 4 days, formed a tech alliance with 3 major lifestyle brands, and my husband wanted me to call the super? I didn't reply. I picked up my phone, tapped the number, and handed it to him. Here, I said, you're capable. He took the phone, blinking slowly, and walked away like I'd slapped him. That afternoon, Margaret called. You ready for a bombshell? She asked. Are we being sued? She laughed. No, we've been shortlisted for the Bellevue Grant. I froze. The Bellevue Grant was not just money, it was prestige, validation. It meant media coverage, doors opened, tables set with your name on the place card. It meant legitimacy. There's a catch, she said. They want to interview the entire founding team, including your spouse. My spouse had nothing to do with Eloise. I know, but they're courting press. They like optics, husband-wife teams in tech. Romance meets ROI. You know the drill. I rubbed my temples. So I have to make him look involved? You have to make it look like you're still married, she said carefully. My throat went dry. I hadn't realized how far the fracture had gone until someone else pointed out how visible the cracks were. That night, I asked Ethan to dinner. He looked up from his laptop. With who? Just us. He blinked. Like, a date? Yes, I said. A date. We went to the restaurant where we had our first anniversary dinner. Amelie's, French bistro, string lights, table for 2 in the back. Ethan wore the same watch I'd given him that night years ago, but he wore it like a prop now, like something that had once mattered and now didn't quite fit. Halfway through the bottle of Bordeaux, I said it. We're not okay. He nodded. No, we're not. I don't know if we're even us anymore. He sipped his wine. You changed. No, I said. I returned. To what? To the woman I was before you, before your mother. Before I believed that being loved meant being quiet. Ethan set down his glass. I didn't ask you to be quiet, Julia. You didn't have to, I said. You let her do it for you, and you never once told her to stop. He looked away. Now that I'm visible, I said. You're resentful. I'm intimidated. His honesty startled me. I see you in magazines. I see you on podcasts. You're being called a visionary, and I'm still trying to get my own promotion. Then get it, I said. Climb. Succeed. But don't punish me because I stopped waiting. He nodded slowly. I don't know if I can catch up. You don't have to, I whispered. Just don't hold me back. We sat in silence after that. 2 people who once shared a bed, now separated by fear, pride, and unmet expectations. When we got home, he went to the guest room without a word. The next day, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a leather-bound folder. Inside that, photos. Me. At the Florence pitch, leaving the villa. boarding the jet, but also Ethan, at a hotel bar in Tribeca, with Amber Lawson, his firm's paralegal, her hand on his lap, a timestamp from 2 nights before we flew to Florence. I stared at the photos for a long time, not because I didn't expect it, but because part of me had still hoped I was wrong. That night, I didn't confront him. I did something worse. I went quiet, because silence, in the right hands, is a blade. 3 days later, I had lunch with my lawyer, Elizabeth Hartley, Precision and Pumps. She'd handled my friend Mara's divorce from a pharmaceutical CEO, and walked away with 2 homes, a pension percentage, and sole custody. "What do you want?" she asked. "Leverage," I said. "Options. I'll need to see your prenup." I slid the folder across the table. She flipped to page 9. Standard distribution clause, but wait. Her finger stopped. "Moral turpitude clause," she read aloud. "Any party proven to have committed adultery, financial fraud, or public misconduct forfeits right to joint assets." She looked up. "Did you write this?" His mother's lawyer did. Elizabeth smiled like a shark. "Perfect." I slid her the envelope of photos. "Then we start building the exit," she said. "Quietly, strategically, and with diamonds. In divorce isn't a rupture. It's an architecture. Each choice, each withheld comment, each carefully saved email becomes scaffolding. What you once called a marriage becomes a case file, a war plan, a blueprint of survival. And in that blueprint, I learned my silence had value. Because Ethan didn't know I had the photos. He didn't know I'd met with Elizabeth. He didn't know that every time I poured him coffee, I was documenting bank statements on my phone. Every dinner I pretended to enjoy was a chance to memorize passwords, locate keys, understand the pattern of his lies. He thought I was fragile. He thought my power was performative. He forgot that I was watching. It started small. I changed the login on our joint calendar. Then I changed the Wi-Fi password. Then I removed my name from his car insurance and added it to a new LLC, Fern Forward Inc., my legal entity, my launchpad, my fortress. I moved my earnings into a new account under the business name, redirected my health insurance through a founder benefits group, and contacted the building to have mail redirected to my WeWork suite, under the pretext of a business expansion. Ethan noticed none of it. He was busy playing the doting husband on LinkedIn, posting photos of us at Florence under captions like, "Grateful to stand beside brilliance." Meanwhile, I stood beside my lawyer and signed the first affidavit. Elizabeth moved swiftly. She filed the preliminary motion under seal, invoking the moral turpitude clause, citing photographic evidence, and requesting temporary protection of business assets. She included screenshots of Ethan's texts to Amber, some mundane, others crude, one particularly stupid. "She's too busy being the next Elon to notice I need real attention." We both laughed at that one. "Why are they always this sloppy?" I asked. "Because they think intelligence erases suspicion," Elizabeth replied. "Because they assume the woman building empires still wants their approval." She reached across the desk, serious now. "You understand this gets ugly, right?" "I'm not afraid of ugly," I said. "I'm afraid of going back." And that night, I cooked. I hadn't cooked for Ethan in weeks. I made his favorite: lemon roasted chicken, truffle risotto, sautéed greens. He walked in at 8:12 p.m., briefcase in hand, loosened tie, the scent of Tom Ford and someone else's shampoo on his collar. He blinked at the table. "This is unexpected. I thought we needed a reset." He smiled, wary. "You're not mad?" "I'm tired of being mad." We ate in silence, punctuated only by clinks of cutlery and wine glasses. He poured a second glass. "You know," he said, "maybe we got off track, but we could fix this. You don't have to be on stage all the time. Maybe we just dial it back." There it was, the confession buried in suggestion. He didn't want to rebuild us. He wanted to dim me. "I'll think about it," I said, smiling. Then I cleared the dishes, washed them quietly, and emailed Elizabeth the time-stamped recording from my smartwatch. In the next morning, I found the perfect apartment. Midtown, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows. Enough space for a home office, but not enough for Ethan's ego. I signed the lease in full under Fern Forward Inc., using investor advance capital. I told the broker I'd be moving in soon. Not yet. Soon. Because timing was everything, and there was one more thing I needed first. Celeste called me 2 days later. "I heard a rumor," she said. "Just one?" "Someone saw Elizabeth Hartley leaving your office building." I paused. "Interesting," I said. "What was she wearing?" She didn't laugh. You're preparing to divorce my son. I'm preparing to reclaim my peace. Celeste inhaled sharply. You know what divorce does to a family name, Julia. What it does to legacy. Your son had an affair. Men stumble. He stumbled into someone's mouth, I snapped. Repeatedly. Her silence crackled. Think carefully, she said. There are ways to make this disappear. You leave quietly. No press. A settlement. Private. Respectable. I paused. Respectable? I echoed. You once called me worthless in front of your friends. She didn't deny it. I was trying to protect my son. No. You were trying to erase me before I proved you wrong. More silence. Then, what do you want, Julia? I want you to watch me walk away with everything you said I'd never earn. On Thursday, I received the final document from Elizabeth. Full divorce motion, asset protection, marital property breakdown, and a copy of the prenuptial clause. It was surgical. I read it 3 times, then printed it. That night, while Ethan was at the gym, I placed the document on his side of the bed. On top, I left the envelope of photographs. I didn't leave a note, because clarity doesn't need punctuation. At 11:37 p.m., my phone lit up. Ethan, we can fix this. Ethan, you're overreacting. Ethan, don't throw it all away. I turned off my phone, stepped into the shower, and let the water wash off 6 years of being small. The next morning, I packed my essentials. I left behind the rings, the wedding photos, the framed print from our honeymoon. I took only what was mine: my laptop, my notebooks, my prototype tablet, and the cuff of diamonds I'd worn in Florence. As I closed the door to our penthouse, I heard Ethan's voice from behind it. You're nothing without me. I smiled to myself, because only men who fear your power ever say you had none. The story broke on a Monday. It started small, a mention in page 6's online column. Tech star Julia Fern splits from husband of 6 years. No details, no drama, just the word amicably, which, in media language, usually means someone's publicist is working overtime. But by Tuesday, it wasn't small anymore. Forbes ran a side piece. Eloise, founder, parts ways with spouse, remains focused on growth. Then TechCrunch added fuel. Rumors swirl over alleged infidelity in NYC power couples split. And by Wednesday, the Daily Mail, because of course, published a full article with photos of Ethan leaving our building with Amber at midnight. Blurry, but damning. I hadn't leaked them, but someone had. Elizabeth smiled when I asked if she knew who. Maybe Amber's landlord needed the rent, she shrugged. Or maybe karma just has good timing. Either way, the silence I'd crafted so carefully was now a chorus. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the world needed to know. I hadn't left a marriage. I'd exited a performance. And the emails came in waves. Some from women I'd never met. You walked out carrying your dignity like a crown. Thank you. How did you know when it was time to stop protecting his narrative? You reminded me I'm not crazy, just tired of shrinking. Some from venture capitalists who once looked past me in pitch meetings. Let's revisit that Series A conversation. We may have underestimated the market readiness. And some, surprisingly, from men like Ethan, polished, poised, scared. Your success scares the hell out of me, but I respect it. Reading your story made me realize I've never truly asked my wife what she dreams about. I used to be your husband. I hope I'm not anymore. It was surreal. The same people who once questioned if I deserved a seat at the table were now asking me how I'd built it. But the most unexpected email came from Amber. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought you were done. I don't know what I thought. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Because closure doesn't always come through conversation. Sometimes it comes through confirmation. On the art in mind, and 2 weeks later, I stood on the rooftop of the Ludlow Collective, an exclusive venue for tech demos, about to introduce the full beta launch of Eloise. The sun was setting, casting the skyline in golden tension. My new team, grown from 4 to 15, buzzed around the rooftop, managing logistics, lighting, sound. Margaret approached, clipboard in hand. You ready? I looked out over the crowd. Influencers, VCs, journalists, old college professors, strangers who now knew more about my personal life than some of my own family. I'm ready, I said, but she's more than ready. I tapped my phone. Eloise responded through the speaker. Good evening, Julia. You're going to crush this. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The pitch began. Not just about tech, but about transformation. Eloise isn't just an assistant. She's the woman behind every woman who's ever been told to sit down and smile. She schedules your power moves. She confirms your worth. She never asks you to apologize for ambition. The applause was immediate, real. And when I walked off stage, Margaret handed me a glass of champagne. "To the Empire," she said. "To the end of needing permission," I replied. Ethan filed a response to the divorce 2 days later. His lawyers tried to contest the moral turpitude clause, calling it interpretive. Elizabeth countered with time-stamped photos, text messages, financial transfers to Amber's Venmo labeled therapy, and a signed statement from our building's doorman confirming Ethan's guest visits. The judge sided with us. The clause held. He would walk away with his savings and his pride bruised. I would walk away with my company, my apartment, and full ownership of all IP associated with Eloise. Celeste called once after the ruling. She didn't leave a voicemail. She didn't need to, because silence speaks volumes when all you've ever used is condescension. That weekend, I moved into the new apartment. It wasn't opulent. It was strategic. South-facing windows, open plan, smart lighting, just enough room for breath, ambition, and the occasional bottle of rosé on the balcony. Emma helped me unpack. She pulled out a small box from the bottom of the last suitcase. Inside, my wedding shoes, satin, ivory, unworn since the ceremony. I looked at them for a long time, then placed them in the donation pile. "Sentimental?" she asked. "No," I said. "Symbolic." She smiled. "You're different now." "No," I said. "I'm just finally uninterrupted." 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I stopped checking the headlines. Not because they stopped printing them, but because they no longer defined me. My name wasn't followed by wife of, or scandal, or upstart. It was followed by founder, visionary, CEO, and more importantly, by silence. The kind of silence that meant no one dared to reduce me anymore. Eloise had surpassed projections. We crossed 150,000 active users in beta. Our Series A round had closed oversubscribed, bringing in investors from sectors I once couldn't even get meetings with. We had offices in 2 cities. Our team had grown to 37. I wasn't just the face of a startup. I was the architect of a standard. But amidst the build and buzz, something unexpected found its way into my inbox. The name stopped me cold. Caleb Lynn. I hadn't seen that name in nearly a decade. We had studied together at NYU, built our first app prototype together, spent entire nights coding in the engineering lab with vending machine coffee and unspoken affection. He was the what if I'd packed away when I said yes to Ethan. His email was short. Saw the Forbes profile. "You didn't just prove them wrong, you redesigned the damn map. If you're ever up for coffee and closure, let me know." I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop, because closure doesn't come in a paper cup, and I didn't trust nostalgia in a tailored suit. The next day, Anna cornered me after our investor check-in. "You look off." "I'm fine. You just closed a $4 million follow-on round and you're eating almonds like you're bracing for a breakup." I sighed. "I got a message from someone. From before Ethan." She raised a brow. "Good someone? Or complicated someone?" "Both." "You want to see him?" "No." "You want him to want to see you?" I looked at her. "That already happened." She grinned. "Then get dressed. You've got a founders panel in 20 minutes, and you look like a woman holding a memory instead of a mic." Andor. That evening, I didn't respond to Caleb's message, but I did Google him. He'd built a clean energy startup, sold it, now consulting, single, as far as the internet could tell. His LinkedIn profile said, "Helping people build things that matter." Part of me wanted to reply, to say, "You were the only person who ever saw me before anyone needed to." But I didn't, because I no longer needed to be seen. I was building something that mattered too. 2 weeks later, the Eloise team flew to Miami for the LUX Tech Summit. Our booth was minimalist and sleek. Silver panels, velvet-backed screens, scent diffusers pumping custom-blended bergamot and verbena. A sensorial experience, just as we'd designed it. On the first night, after the opening reception, I stepped out onto the hotel's rooftop terrace for air, and Caleb was there. No email, no meeting, just real, unscripted presence. He wore a linen shirt, open at the collar, older, sharper, still the same eyes that once memorized lines of code like poetry. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," he said. "I wasn't sure you were real," I replied. He chuckled, quiet. "I didn't reach out to complicate anything. I know. I just wanted to say, Back then, I saw it. Before the app. Before Ethan. I saw what you could build. My throat tightened. And I sabotaged it, I admitted. No, he said. You paused it. There's a difference. We stood in silence for a while. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just unfinished. Do you want to catch up properly? He asked. Maybe, I said. But not as a regret. He nodded. Then not at all. And just like that, he walked away. Not to punish, but to respect the boundary I didn't know I'd drawn. I'll say Ninurm. Later that night, I sat alone in my suite, writing in the journal I'd resurrected from Ethan's closet months ago. Success without peace is just performance. Vindication without healing is just noise. And power without purpose is a costume. Eloise pinged. A new user. Another executive. Another woman on the rise. I smiled. Not because she was famous, but because she wasn't. And she had chosen me to help her climb. It's the next morning. My assistant handed me a silver envelope. Inside, an invitation. Women in Innovation Gala. You are this year's recipient of the Vanguard Impact Award, presented by Vogue Business and Hudson Innovation Lab. I blinked. The same lab I once walked into, 5 years ago, shaking and unsure. The same lab I had turned down when I thought being someone's wife meant being someone's shadow. And now I would return, not as a student or a pitch hopeful, but as a model of what happens when women refuse to stay silent. The Women in Innovation Gala was held in the main hall of the Astoria Crown, an opulent space steeped in marble and mirrors, dripping in crystal and significance. The kind of place where people don't just arrive, they debut. And that night, it felt like everything I'd walked through had been leading here, not to applause, but to confirmation. I was no longer building proof, I was standing in it. The stylist Margaret had hired met me at the suite with 2 garment bags and a tray of espresso shots. You could wear something conservative, she said, holding up a navy column gown with subtle pleats and a modest neckline. I stared at it, then looked at the second option. Blood red, backless, sculpted like armor. I didn't hesitate. That one, she smiled. Thought so. As I stepped out of the town car and onto the carpet, I saw flashes. Media, press, sponsors. They didn't shout my name. They knew it. They didn't ask, "Who are you wearing?" They asked, "What's next for Eloise?" I answered with poise, "The future." Margaret greeted me inside with a glass of champagne. "You look like war in heels," she said. "Good, because the room's full of soft men with sharp pens." "I'm not here to be liked," I replied. Just remembered. When the lights dimmed and the event began, I expected a standard sequence. Speeches, awards, wine refills. But then I saw her, Celeste, sitting at a side table, pearls gleaming, hair perfectly controlled, and her eyes watching me. I blinked. She hadn't RSVP'd. I'd checked. But she was here, silent, undeniable, like a ghost who didn't believe in death. Then the presenter walked to the podium. This year's Vanguard Impact Award goes to a woman who refused to be underestimated, who turned silence into software, who turned a dismissive dinner table into a global platform. I froze, because the words felt too personal, too precise. Then Margaret smiled at me. She had written the speech. "Please welcome," the host said. "Julia Fern, founder of Eloise." Applause erupted. I walked to the stage slowly, not from nerves, but from gravity, because I wasn't walking alone. I was carrying every version of me that had ever been silenced. The girl who cried in stairwells after board meetings. The woman who scrubbed her resume to sound less ambitious. The wife who once apologized for being too much. They walked with me, and we took the stage together. I adjusted the mic, paused, then spoke. When I was 16, I wrote my first line of code in a dusty computer lab where the boys wouldn't let me touch the keyboard. Laughter. I didn't push back. I just watched, memorized, then built something better in secret. Quiet. I've spent a lot of my life doing things in secret, thinking it made me clever, protected, safe, but safety is rarely strength, and silence is rarely golden. Applause began. I kept going. Eloise is not just a tool. She's not just tech. She is the embodiment of every woman who's ever carried the weight of unpaid labor, invisible intelligence, and the whispered belief that she was meant for more. Now they stood. Margaret nodded. Celeste didn't move. She just stared. I finished with, "So to the girls coding after midnight, to the women rewriting their stories at 35, at 50, at 70, Know this. You are not late. You are not too loud. You are not asking for too much. You are the product. You are the prize. And from now on, you are the voice. Thunderous applause, flashes, tears. I didn't cry. I had cried already. This was the reward for enduring it dry-eyed. Backstage, someone handed me my clutch. Inside, a handwritten note. I was wrong. Not just about you. About myself. I thought legacy came from control, but it comes from courage. I hope one day you'll forgive me for choosing the wrong kind of power. Celeste. I folded it. Didn't smile. Didn't crumble. I simply exhaled. Because forgiveness, like freedom, doesn't need witnesses. That night, I rode home alone. No escort. No Ethan. No headlines to read. Just me, the award in my lap, and the quiet understanding that I no longer needed anyone to believe in me but myself. My apartment greeted me with silence, and I welcomed it. I kicked off my heels, placed the award on the mantel, and made tea. Eloise pinged. Congratulations, Julia. You did it. No, I whispered back. We did, because I had built her, and she, in turn, had rebuilt me. 1 year after I left Ethan, I returned to the house we once shared, not to reconcile, not to reclaim, but to release. The building had gone on the market 2 months prior, and my name was still on the deed. The buyer, a young couple expecting their first child, wanted to meet me. The wife had written in her email, "This home has a story, doesn't it? I can feel it in the walls. If you're open to it, we'd love to know a piece of it from you." So I came back, not as the woman who once scrubbed wine spills from marble countertops while her husband critiqued her ambition, but as the woman who had turned silence into software and heartbreak into momentum. The air in the penthouse was still, not stale, just emptied of meaning. The walls echoed softer. The furniture had been cleared. My laughter, my tears, even my resentment had all packed their bags. I placed the key on the counter and walked room by room, letting memory flicker like light through sheer curtains. The guest room where Ethan once slept for clarity. The balcony where I'd stood with Celeste, diamonds on my wrist and fury in my spine. The kitchen where I cooked the meal before I served him his consequences. And finally the bedroom, where I once folded my dreams into corners too tight for their unfolding. I didn't cry, because what we leave behind willingly is not loss. It's liberation. After the final walkthrough, I met with Margaret at the Eloise headquarters, now rebranded as a polished duplex space in Soho, with floor-to-ceiling windows and sunlight that poured in like recognition. "You know," she said, sipping her espresso, "we've had acquisition offers from 2 major firms this month. Not interested. One of them has a lot of zeros. I didn't build Eloise to sell her. I built her because I never wanted to depend on someone else's schedule, approval, or ego again." She smiled, still the girl with the red dress and sharper heels. "No," I said. "That girl needed the dress to be heard. This one doesn't." We reviewed quarterly projections, international expansion, licensing, even whispers about a docuseries from a streaming platform. My story, they said, was modern mythology. But I wasn't interested in being a myth. I wanted to be useful, which is why I said yes when Anna proposed we open a mentorship division under the company. Not to create another platform, but to pull up more seats, because the table wasn't big enough, and we were done eating in silence. 3 months later, I gave a lecture at my old university, NYU, same hall where I once sat in the back, afraid to raise my hand because I didn't want to sound too intense. This time, I spoke first. The hall was packed. Not because I was famous, but because I was familiar. They knew me. They were me. One student asked, "What would you say to your younger self?" I paused, then said, "You won't be too much for the right people, but you will be a mirror for the wrong ones, and that reflection will scare them, so they'll call you arrogant, or ungrateful, or worthless. But keep building, because diamonds don't scream, they shine." Ethan never apologized. Not really. He sent a letter once, typed, formal, correct. Something about regret and poor decisions and hoping I was well. I didn't respond, but I kept it. Not for closure, for context. Because remembering where I came from didn't mean I hadn't moved on. It just meant I understood the path beneath my feet. Celeste's story ended differently. 6 months after the divorce, she stepped down from 3 of her boards. Health issues, fatigue, graceful retreat they called it. One night, I received a call from her assistant, asking if I'd meet with her. I said yes, Not because I owed her anything, but because power includes choice, and I chose dignity. We met at her estate, smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown too large for its games. She looked older, tired. "Congratulations," she said. "You've become everything I was afraid of." "Thank you," I said. We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, "Do you hate me?" "No," I said. "I just stopped trying to impress you." She nodded slowly. "I did try to erase you, didn't I?" "Yes. And now they quote you in boardrooms." I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just breathed. She asked if I would consider speaking at her final gala, a women's fund she had ironically started, even as she undermined the one woman closest to her. I agreed, and I wore red, not out of spite, but out of remembrance, of the girl I was the day she called me worthless. And 1 year to the day after my departure, I returned to Florence, not for a wedding, not for a performance, but for myself. I stood on the tarmac again, same jet, same air, but everything had changed. In my hand, a sapphire bracelet from my grandmother. At my side, a tablet with the latest version of Eloise, now live in 5 countries, and in my heart, no hunger for revenge, only clarity, only calm, only control. As I boarded the plane, the pilot greeted me by name. "Where to, Ms. Fern?" "Anywhere," I said. "Everywhere."